I know.
We're going to restart. I'd like to go ahead and start our meeting, call it to order. Today is Monday, October 14th, and this is a meeting of the Cedar Rapids Community School District Regular Board of Education. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're glad that you're here. Before we start, let's go ahead and approve our agenda. Keith?
I move that the agenda of Monday, October 14, 2013 Board of Education meeting be approved as set forth, and that each item is considered ready for discussion and/or action.
Second, please.
Second.
Call action.
Director Humbles.
Aye.
Director Rosenthal.
Aye.
Director Laverty.
Aye.
Director Anhalt.
Aye.
Director Witt. Director Westerkamp.
Aye.
President Meisterling.
Thank you. Okay, so tonight we're going to start our meeting off with two public hearings on the disposition of district-owned properties. Everyone will have up to 5 minutes to share their thoughts or concerns with our board. And Laurel Day, who's our board secretary, will raise her hand when I think you're going to do a 30-second, and then she's going to tell you when your 5 minutes is up. The board will not engage in dialogue at this time, but we do welcome your comments and we'll take them into consideration when action is called for later on in the meeting. We ask that anyone speaking tonight state their name and address for our record, and please do not restate a concern that's already been shared. If we've heard it once, we understand that concern, and we don't need you to continue on with it. So I'd like to now open the public hearing regarding the disposition of Lincoln School, located at 912 18th Avenue Southeast. And before I receive oral comments, I would like to ask Laurel if she's received any written objections by any resident.
No written objections have been received.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go ahead and open for oral comments. I do have some folks that have filled out the request to address the school board, so we'll start with Beth DeBoom. Oh, podium is right there. Yep.
Hi, my name is Beth DeBoom. I live at 348 Garden Drive Southeast in Cedar Rapids, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Save Cedar Rapids Heritage. Obviously, I'm going to have a preservation standpoint, but I have a little bit of an economic twist to this as well. So we have collected our thoughts, and this is the statement that we have on the disposition of Lincoln Elementary. Lincoln Elementary is the oldest Cedar Rapids School District building still standing, and while old, it's actually in decent shape according to Scott Olson, who cites fairly new roofs, rooms with zoned air conditioning units, energy-efficient windows, and new boilers that keep utility bills low. The building is also believed to be eligible for the National Register. This makes it more attractive to developers than a vacant lot, since it opens up the opportunity for developers to take advantage of tax credits and other incentives. Since receiving publicity some weeks ago, several interested parties have contacted Scott Olson about this property. There is also a private housing development investor who's interested in Lincoln Elementary. This investor is financially qualified and working with a development company in taking a look at the property. In short, we don't believe all avenues have been exhausted in marketing Lincoln Elementary. While you may approve pursuing demolition this evening, we ask that you not act in haste, but instead give this historic building ample chance to be redeveloped rather than razing it. This makes sense both from a preservation and an economic standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Kronbaugh? Okay, thank you, Chris. Dennis, I'm sorry. I don't have anyone else that's filled out a form. Does anyone else wish to address the board at this time regarding Lincoln?
Someone else on Lincoln School, Mary.
There's a Lincoln,
Mark Stoffer Hunter?
and that's Monroe.
Good evening. Mark Stouffer Hunter, 1646 3rd Avenue Southeast in Cedar Rapids. And to follow up on the last speaker, encourage the board to please not act too much in haste on the fate of Lincoln School in particular. to look at all the possibilities that may still be possible to preserve the building. It is the oldest school district building still standing in Cedar Rapids, as was mentioned earlier. And I want to remind everyone that older buildings that the district had, including the former district warehouses on G Ave Northwest, have been successfully redeveloped, are in those early stages right now. So it is possible to do this type of preservation, even with a building older than Lincoln. It's been there almost 40 years now since the school district has disposed of a lot of its elementary buildings. This structure is a little bit newer than the old Van Buren, the old Jackson, those types of buildings that were taken down in the early 1970s. It's of a much more early 20th century fireproof structural steel construction as opposed to just stone and brick and wood. Cedar Rapids School District has built 3 buildings with the name of George Washington, at least 2 structures with the name Thomas Jefferson. This is the only Cedar Rapids School District building that honors the memory of President Abraham Lincoln. I think that's a significant historic fact. Also, the architect of the building is Charles Demon. He is noted for many beautiful Cedar Rapids architectural designs, including the St. Wenceslaus Church here in Cedar Rapids. So please consider that historic fact as well. Depending on whatever happens, also encouragement that consideration made for the photographic documentation of the building if the building should undertake any kinds of changes, so we can kind of preserve the history and memory through any particular process, because a lot of people have a lot of personal memories with this building. Can I speak on the Monroe building for a minute as well? No, just Lincoln. Okay, very good. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We appreciate your comments. Okay. I don't see anything else before me regarding Lincoln. I'll ask at this time if anyone else would like to address the board regarding Lincoln. Seeing none, I will now close the hearing regarding Lincoln Elementary. Next, I'd like to open up the public hearing for the disposition of Monroe Elementary, which is the sale of property and facility to Affordable Housing Network. Laurel, have you received anything of record?
This afternoon at about 10 minutes to 5, I did receive a petition from I believe, the neighbors in the Monroe School area.
And so noted by the board. At this time, I'll ask for oral comments, and we'll start with Anthony Arrington.
I'd like to be excused, Madam
Yes.
President.
Yep,
Excuse myself.
okay. Wait just a minute, Anthony, till Alan leaves. Okay, go ahead.
So Anthony Arrington, 1311 34th Street Southeast. Wasn't really sure what I was going to say when I got here. I really just came to be a listener, but more importantly, I know that I have a whole conglomerate of neighbors who have a lot of concerns about not so much the demolition of the building, but what you plan to do with it. And I think I'm here to speak on 2 sides of the fence. And I think it's important that we have a careful look. And I won't sit here and say that I have a ton of history on what exactly is going to happen, but I know enough to know that it's raising up concerns in my neighborhood that I want to kind of give my 2 cents, and hopefully maybe you can share some information with me, or maybe I need to go somewhere to dig a little further. But it's my understanding that what's going to happen here is they're going to take this unit and convert it into some low-income housing. That's correct, right? So my concern, I don't have any concern with low-income housing. In fact, I'm a product of a low-income family, so I am going to be the first to say I don't have any problem with any sort of low-income housing. My concern is, having lived in this neighborhood for 10 years, what the traffic is like, and what the traffic has been like since I moved in the development at Pioneer Development has taken place. The traffic is atrocious. Everybody in my neighborhood has complained about it. I've been a victim of 3 major accidents in the last 5 years, one just a month ago. And that neighbor the person who damaged my property didn't come from the apartment. So I have no concern per se about the actual concept of building low-income housing. My concern is, what are you going to do, or what are the developers going to do at Affordable Housing Network to control the traffic in our neighborhood, because it's very bad and it's getting worse. And my concern is how we're going to handle that. And I think there are multiple concerns here regarding the unit, and I think that's my primary concern. So I just wanted to say before we move forward, before those decisions are made, I would sure like to know how we're going to manage traffic in the neighborhood. And also, I guess I would add to that a caveat as we look at low-income housing, we look at what plans there are to develop that area, what sort of rules, regulations, covenants are in place to control the upkeep of that neighborhood. Because I can tell you from across the street what's going on over there. I think everybody sees it. And again, I'm going to be the first to say I have no problem with low-income housing, zero. I think it's effective and I think it's important. But the question is, how do we cluster, manage, and control those who own those properties? And so if whoever's going to own, if it's Affordable Housing Network, is going to own those units, what sort of rules, regulations, and accountability is going to be held in place? Because I can tell you what's going on across the street is not good. And that doesn't mean everybody in that unit, everybody in those units across the street are bad people. It has nothing to do with that. Again, first to admit, low-income housing product. My concern is, what are the owners going to do to manage their units and manage the upkeep? So I would ask that you please consider those two things as you look to sell this unit, sell this property to the owners. How are we going to manage that traffic over there, and what sort of stop gaps and processes are going to be put in place by the city, because it's gotten terrible, I guess for lack of a better term, terrible. And what are we going to do to hold landowners accountable for the upkeep and the tenants in their property? So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments. Dennis Orr?
Hello. Members of the school board. In 2011, the City Council of Cedar Rapids commissioned the well-respected firm of Maxfield Research to do a study to determine the housing needs in Cedar Rapids and the effects of the subsidies already given that we're having on existing homes. The result of that study is a 40-page report that I'm giving you a copy of today. In that report, I would like you to pay special attention to 2 pages. The first page is page 26, where the writer states that the previous subsidies that have caused a destabilization of values. She goes on to say that the owners of the homes are having to lower the sale price of their homes to compete with the builders who are receiving subsidies from the city. The second page is page 40. The writer ends her entire report with one sentence she chose to put in bold letters. She says the city should not subsidize any homes outside core neighborhoods. Our neighborhood is outside the core neighborhoods. I'm also attaching a complete list of hundreds of homes and condos and hundreds of apartments that the city council has already subsidized. The net effect of over-subsidizing has been to lower the value of homes that are not being subsidized, and that's unfair to us. A government should not use its power to hurt its citizens, and this program does exactly that. I would ask you to turn this down completely, or at least table it until we have time to put together a list of non-subsidized homes that have already shown a dramatic loss in assessed value as a result of these programs being used in other parts of the city. We respectfully thank you for your time and consideration. Thank you.
You.
I'll give you.
I could take all those copies for
Just
you.
have 5 copies.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, next I have Jay Wordley.
Good evening. Personally, I am opposed to the subsidized housing area there. and I do believe that it will decrease our property values. It'll also increase the traffic in our neighborhood. Right now, we have speeders in the neighborhood. Motorcycles are the most aggressive people in the neighborhood. Sometimes you can see them going down the street at 2 and 3 times the speed limit. Parking problems, like in front of, when the school was in session, and I even went over and talked with the principal, and she wholeheartedly agreed with me and wrote a letter to the people on school activity days to not park in front of our mailbox. We're at 32-1 Pioneer, just diagonal from the school there. And people would be parking in front of our mailbox. Unfortunately, our mail would not be delivered. They would just put a note there that they was undeliverable. And also, if the trash had not been picked up, they would not pick up our trash. We had to call the city and ask them to come out and especially pick up our trash, and they would do so in the afternoon. I believe that there'd be an increase in vandalism. In the past history, our mailbox has been vandalized 3 times in the length of time that we've lived there since January of '97. And our home has also been broken into. At that time, we were gone less than 2 hours on an errand, and our home just alone, without the valuables that we lost, sustained $6,800 in damage. And also there's shooting from the other apartments there that are on down the street that are low income. They're shooting back in the woods there. They are, from time to time, I would like to think, shooting game out of season, such as deer and turkey. You can, more times than not, hear gunshots back over there, and it's not the same as what you can hear from the police range that is several miles away. And we've also came home to a warning one afternoon after doing some errands there. The Cedar Rapids police were on our driveway, and we were instructed to go into our house and lock all the doors. The reason was that there was an armed person roaming our neighborhood. This was in the middle of the afternoon, so it was a daylight time. I would like to present you with this Maxfield report from Mrs. Bajorn and Mary Bajorn, and I've highlighted these 2 pages here that are appropriate to look at, page 25, 26, 39, and 40. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Worley.
Next, I have Teresa Hockey.
Good afternoon. My name is Therese Hockey, and I live at 1521 Oak Ridge Lane Southeast. It is a 4-plex condo building that is privately owned by all 4 owners. I am here today with our group, the Monroe Neighborhood Pride Committee, and could I please have everyone from our group stand to show our support? Thank you. We have submitted a copy of the petition that we had circulated and had signed by 284 individuals in protest of the Monroe School project moving forward and wanting to stop the property from even being rezoned. Included in our petition are the signatures of 49% of the people who are required to be notified that live within the 300 feet around the Monroe School property. These individuals all received notices of the informational meeting and were notified of today's meeting as well. Our petition has gone beyond the very close Monroe neighborhood and includes individuals from 28th Street to 38th Street and also other areas such as Parkwood, Glenway, Windsor, Harold, Henderson, Wood Avenue, Hill, Sealy, Adams, Timber Court, Fawn Hill, Sheridan, Crestview, and Parkview. We also have had 6 individuals who live on the northwest, southwest, and northeast quadrants of Cedar Rapids that came forward and signed this petition on our behalf. I am here today to voice our concerns about the sale of the property and buildings at the former Monroe School property located at 3200 Pioneer Avenue Southeast, to the Affordable Housing Network intended for low-income rental properties. Selling this property to the Affordable Housing Network would have a severe negative impact on our neighborhood and would directly affect loss of value, tax revenue, and a substantial amount of money that would directly benefit the city's school system and future resources that our children's education needs. Selling this property to the Affordable Housing Network would affect change, including changing the housing density structure of the neighborhood. Currently, there are more than enough rental housing options available, and my understanding is that they are affordable prices for low-income families. It would lower our residential property values and the tax base for this part of the city. It would flood existing capacity of roads, parking areas, and other services with additional parking and traffic that they were never built to handle. It would destroy current property owners' continued efforts to stabilize and improve this area, including current owners of some of the complexes that were creating safety and crime issues. It would take away the safety in the neighborhood, the pride in our property ownership that we all share and cherish. It would also take away the possibilities for permanent family-based housing for our Monroe neighborhood. I strongly believe and urge the city to solicit and evaluate more appropriate options for this property, some of which could include senior housing availability, daycare facilities for the growing families in our neighborhoods, a community center with activities and services for seniors, young families, as well as any other residents that are permanently intending to settle in our neighborhoods. Enlarge the current park adjacent to this property with family-friendly activities such as splash pads, additional playground equipment, picnic pavilions, and other things that would attract families that are actually invested in our neighborhood and want to remain there and make it grow and flourish. The Affordable Housing Network purchasing this property takes away our ability to continue to foster pride in our neighborhood, in the families that we want to come and grow with us and enjoy what our neighborhood has to offer, which include and are dear to us the fact that there is a lot of wildlife in the area. You can go out on any given day and be confronted with turkeys, deer, or other various raccoon creatures. So we really do thank you for listening to our concerns and considering what we have to say, because the bottom line for us is our families grow and thrive here. We love our neighborhood, and we don't want the demographics to be changed to take away those things that we treasure most. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, I have Carrie, and Carrie, I apologize, I can't read your last name.
Shaner.
Again?
Shaner.
Okay, Carrie Shaner. Thank you. Apologize.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Kerry Shaner, and I live at 1323 34th Street Southeast in Cedar Rapids. And I apologize, I probably stepped in here a few minutes late. I don't want to reiterate some points that have already been stressed, so if I do that, please forgive me. I've got a question here. First off, my crew, we're all curious as to what amount of time was spent in aggressively finding a way to liquidate out of Monroe School. I'm asking anybody.
I'm sorry, Carrie. This is a public hearing. This is the time that the board received comments. We don't dialogue at this time. We do that later on in the meeting.
Oh,
Have a
okay, I
board
was not
discussion.
privy to that.
Yep.
Okay, moving along, I've got a report from the impact of affordable housing on communities and households. And I'm not sure, but what, it wasn't this report that this gentleman talked about at the zoning committee. This is out of Minnesota. Concerning property values. I will paraphrase here. Public housing projects typically have negative or mixed impacts on property values. Research suggests that small scattered site projects perform best among public housing projects. The impact of public scale depends on neighborhood characteristics. Large projects typically have the most benefits on property values in low-income areas and neighborhoods, while the opposite is true in higher-income neighborhoods, where large projects typically have mixed impacts. Large, I am assessing the units that will be with this new Monroe School project, along with the ones that are already there, in excess of 200 residential living quarters. That's a lot. That is a lot. 3 years ago, I contested my property assessment and actually got it lowered by $21,000 because of where I lived. Proof is in the pudding. I'm sorry. But it just is going to be a big detriment to an established neighborhood, which I'm sorry if I use was there first, but we were. And we've got a nice way of life established. We're productive, don't bother anyone, we don't shoot anybody, we don't go knock over mailboxes, which has been an issue on our street for the last couple of nights. We don't speed down the streets, we mind our P's and Q's, keep our nose clean, and we shouldn't have to pay for any contradiction to that or any infringement of that. It's just not right. We pay property taxes, and I'm just, there's just such a multitude of levels here that this just is not congruent with a productive, positive lifestyle for everyone, and I stress everyone who is concerned with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I have Robin Cash.
Robin Cash, 1806 Grand Avenue Southeast in Cedar Rapids, 52403. I hadn't really intended to come to the meeting today, but over the weekend I took an extended walk through the neighborhood that is companion to Monroe School, and I did that because I went to a City Planning Commission meeting last week, and first, I'd heard of the proposal to develop that site in a new way and was impressed that the neighborhood turned out, I judged, almost 50 people at this meeting. And so I thought, well, something's going on here if that many people are willing to turn out on what I later learned was about 5 days' notice to make a meeting. And so this weekend, I walked the neighborhood. And in doing, and then I also toured the grounds of the school, and I drove around the apartments that are just to the south, and I observed the apartments that are on the west, and came away with several questions, and wondered if maybe this was a project that warranted further review and perhaps reconsideration. There's already significant density in that area with the apartments that exist. And the neighborhood, as I observed it, and I walked it from 28th Street Southeast, south of Mount Vernon Road, up to 38th Street Southeast. The neighborhood is, in my view, really in pretty good shape. There are some spots where there are signs of decline and where homes have not been paid attention to with the care that most of the neighborhood reflects. I am aware that density problems can affect a neighborhood that is constituted basically of single-family dwellings, owner-occupied dwellings. So that concerns me, and I wondered if maybe there was another alternative for this facility. And then I'm not sure I have all the details straight, but I understood that the board was planning to sell this to ANI, Affordable Housing Network, for significantly less than its appraised or assessed value. And so I thought, we had an election recently, and the board was trying to double a tax in order to take care of some capital issues, maintenance issues. And so I thought, how is this going to come across to the public that you all wanted this much more money, twice as much money as you've been accustomed to getting, and then you're practically, shall I say, giving away a building. I think perhaps more than $500,000 than its assessed value. So I think just on perception grounds, the public is going to have some questions about kind of where your heads are with this. So those are some observations that I came away with after talking to probably almost a dozen people in the neighborhood and walking the neighborhood this past weekend. So I thank you for your attention, and I hope you will give some reconsideration to this project and perhaps see an alternative use for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well. I don't have any other formal address.
There's one coming up here.
I do have one. Does anyone else wish to address our board regarding Monroe Elementary and the disposition of that property? Seeing none, I will close the hearing out regarding Monroe. I thank everyone for coming and sharing their thoughts and concerns. Later on in our meeting, the board will have a discussion, and we will make a decision regarding both of those facilities, so that we hope that you stay around and hear the presentations and hear our discussion. But again, thank you for coming out. Next is superintendent's report and board report.
Would you like me to get Director Witt?
Yes, thank you. About him. Okay, next I'll turn it over to Dr. Benson for a superintendent report.
Thank you. I'm pleased to share that the English Language Learner Program in the district met annual measurable achievable objectives, targets for reading and math on the Iowa assessments, as well as targets for the English proficiency and growth on the Iowa English Language Development Assessment. In fact, Cedar Rapids is one of only 9 accountable schools out of 33 in the state of Iowa that met these targets. So congratulations to our students and our faculty and staff that work with our English Language Learner Program. This is National School Lunch Week, and our schools are marking the week by serving foods from various regions of the country. Meals include State Fair corn dogs from Midwest, for Midwest at the ballpark, chicken and waffles to celebrate Southern-style cooking, Philly cheesesteaks representing Mid-Atlantic fare, taco salad for Tex-Mex, Hawaiian chicken rice to celebrate Aloha from the island. Did you know that over 11,000 lunches are served each day in Cedar Rapids schools? I know they put a lot in, and during our hot opening, the kitchen staff really deserves a lot of credit because most of those areas are not air conditioned, and they put in a lot to serve the lunches. So thanks for all of those individuals. The 17th annual Reads America Reading is Contagious is happening this week on Friday, the 18th. The district is proud to coordinate this community-wide literacy celebration. More than 2,200 community members are expected to visit our classrooms and read to elementary school students during the event. And finally, the district's Five Seasons Learning Center has been recognized as being among the best child care centers in the state. Learning centers at Arthur, Gibson, Nixon, and Wright elementary schools received a 5, the highest possible rating on a voluntary Iowa Quality Rating System for child care and preschool programs. Areas included in the evaluation are professional development, health and safety, environment, family and community partnerships, and leadership and administration. So thanks to all of our five-season daycare folks on running an outstanding program.
Good news for sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Benson. Board reports at this time.
I'd like to report that I attended a meeting at the public library last Saturday, sponsored by PFLAG, which is Parents, Families, Friends of Lesbians and Gays. And as part of that program, they really highlighted program and cooperations they received from the Cedar Rapids schools, particularly our middle school counselors. Tracy Gunder-Yoke, I hope I have that right, was one of the counselors from our district that spearheaded the project in leading PLCs of the counselors, and have started some resource, making available resource materials and sensitizing counselors in our district. So they were very highly complimentary and appreciative of the work that the district is doing, and particularly those middle school counselors. So good news.
Thank you for attending and sharing that. Any other items from board members at this time? Nope. Okay. Next, we'll turn to our consent agenda.
Delegations.
Oh, I'm sorry. Communications, delegations, and petitions. And for those of you who came a little bit later after our public hearings closed, you can certainly comment at this time. And I do have a request from Mr. Hasek regarding Lincoln. Do you want to go ahead and join us at the podium? Thank you. And please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Václav Hasek. I'm at 501 35th Street Southeast. I'm sorry I was a little late today. I had the wrong time. I apologize. I'm a Cedar Rapidian, and obviously the demolition permit I know is out for Lincoln Elementary, and a lot of the historic preservation and revitalization that we see for the Nubo section of town really is based on the historic character of the district. I'm just asking that it might not be easy, but if a creative solution could be found versus demolition of Lincoln Elementary, I think it would be a best long-term strategy for the city.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments. Kevin and Rebecca McCarville.
Superintendent Benson, President Meisterling, members of the board, we are Kevin and Rebecca McCarville, 1803 Mary Beth Avenue Northwest here in Cedar Rapids.
Good evening. We are co-owners of Educare Learning Center here in Cedar Rapids. Educare is a 20-year-old family-owned company with an independent full-service learning center here in Cedar Rapids. In addition, since 2003, we have been on the Iowa Department of Education's approved provider list for after-school tutoring under the No Child Left Behind law. Last year, we had partnerships with 28 Iowa Sinus 2 schools and served almost 500 students at schools, including those here in Cedar Rapids. Data reporting the outcomes of our Educare Sinus 2 model are available on our Educare website.
We're not here because we have an axe to grind or because we're critical of any particular individual. Quite the contrary. We know that the Cedar Rapids Community School District has a well-deserved reputation for outstanding instructional and co-curricular programs. We know that you have a terrific leadership team along with great teachers, staff, and school board.
Last year, the Cedar Rapids school district was able to serve as its own after-school tutoring provider at all Sina 2 schools under No Child Left Behind. This year, as you know, the district is not able to serve as its own after-school tutor provider. Accordingly, parents of eligible at-risk students are going to have to seek those same services from other approved providers for after-school tutoring under No Child Left Behind. That is, if they are going to continue to benefit from the free after-school tutoring opportunity that they are entitled to under federal law.
In past years, eligible parents received additional information from all approved providers wishing to do so through a collaborative effort between the district and those providers. Provider trifold flyers, for example, were sent home to parents of each Sina 2 school, providing additional information for parents to review as an aid for them in the provider selection process. Our experience has been that the additional information sent home to parents has been appreciated by parents and helped ensure as many students as possible benefit from this federally mandated after-school program. This year, the district chose to discontinue that practice of collaborating with providers to send additional information home to parents. To make that change in the same year that the district can no longer serve as its own provider is troubling. The timing of that change is troubling. Federal guidelines stipulate that close collaboration with approved providers, not just EduCare, but all approved providers, must take place to ensure that parents are provided with as much information as possible regarding their choice of an approved provider. When parents receive only a notification of status letter along with an approved list of providers, participation from our experience in the program is typically low, and the majority of at-risk kids don't receive the benefits of that tutoring opportunity. And I think I speak for all providers to say we're appreciative of the district's efforts to host a provider selection form. But 95% of our eligible parents were not able to attend that provider selection form. We're appreciative of the district's efforts to provide trifold brochures in the school lobbies and offices. But our experience has been most parents will not seek out provider information through that means. Conversely, when parents collaborate closely with approved providers, and again, not just us, but any approved provider, to see that additional provider information, such as trifold brochures, are sent home to parents along with a provider selection form, student participation in this valuable program increases significantly. In most cases, this is a simple process of collaboration to ensure that forms are sent home. We would like to ask the district respectfully to please consider its decision to collaborate with providers and send the additional information home to eligible parents.
Thank you for your time.
We very much appreciate your comments. Thank you for sharing them. Larry Winkowski.
Lawrence Winklowski, 4234 Morel Road, Northeast. First of all, regarding the proposed regulation 20211 and future meeting schedules, thank you. Our school district invested a lot of money in this state-of-the-art facility, and I guess I don't understand the need to take any board or administrative meetings outside this building and be having them at any other facility. Because if this facility cannot accommodate any board meeting or that, then I want some money back. You had a board meeting last week, and I think that all board meetings should be recorded, or we need to have some detailed meeting minutes so people can understand what's going on. There's a few things that I seriously dislike. Hypocrisy and lying. Lying comes in many forms, like lying by error, lying by omission, and lies by ignorance. lies by ignorance is something I refer to as when you know someone's lying and you fail to ask the questions to prove it, or when you fail to call them out for lying. Consider sort of like the Eastern Island statues from the night at the museum, without saying dum-dum. This stuff happens a lot around here. The school calendar was approved on September 23rd, is all about hypocrisy and lies. It's been documented and preached that Wednesdays is the best days for PLCs, yet when it's before a Christian holiday, we can make an exception, despite the fact that the U.S. Constitution is clear about separation between church and state. The district says PLCs are needed to improve learning and teaching skills and for helping at-risk students. However, early dismissals have a negative effect on at-risk students by hurting the ability of these families to earn income, or by having them to take time off work to care for their children. It also hurts these families in forcing them to spend income on child care that they would not otherwise need. Many employees do not have flexible hours and comp time, especially in lower paying jobs. Early outs also hurt families of students who are not at risk in the same way. The reason companies give vacation days is not to support professional learning communities, but is to give their employees a break from their job. We hear there is child care available for early dismissal. So I called 4 of the 5 season child care centers to see what the truth was. And I did not call the one at Rockwell, so it was ones that were actually in our schools. All 4 of them told me that child care is only available on a drop-in basis. Some of them said there was a $25 registration fee before, just to sign up to be available for it. One said you didn't need to, and I was given rates of $17, $18, and $32. I don't understand why there's a discrepancy here. And the only person that I talked to and asked this question of, they told me there was never any consideration for having programs for early out days. In the documents for your September 30th meeting, it showed that professional learning communities were for 5 years and were supposed to end in 2013, not expanded in the calendar in 2014. I presented an alternative calendar, not with the expectations that the school board would approve the one I presented over the district's version, but in hopes that the total school board would take it seriously, in hopes that the school board would openly discuss it and not force the vote before discussion was completed, in hopes the school board acts professionally and remembers it represents the community, not the administration, in hopes the school board would find the truth of the lies by omission of the information it receives, and in hopes the school board is smart enough to think outside the box to find a compromise, and in hopes any approved calendars would not violate the U.S. Constitution.
Time is up, thank you.
Okay.
Sue Clapp.
Hi, Sue Clapp, 2242 Evergreen Street Northeast. Good evening, President Meisterling, Dr. Benson, and all others. Tonight I'm here to share another story about our dedicated and caring teachers. Chuck Kelsey, an 8th grade science teacher at Franklin, has been organizing summer travel for 8th grade students for the past 4 years. Michelle Barker, a language arts teacher new to our district last year, got involved after hearing reports of a wonderful field trip experience that it was for these students and adult chaperones. During the 2013 school year, one student expressed interest. However, her family could not afford the fees to send her on the trip. Mrs. Barker worked closely with the student and her family to write letters to organizations requesting money and to plan other fundraising opportunities. The pivotal point in the students' fundraising came when Mrs. Barker applied for and was awarded a $1,000 Student and Youth Travel Association ROAD, R-O-A-D, scholarship on the students' behalf. This completed the students' fundraising and allowed her to travel with the group. Mr. Kelsey's trip agendas always included numerous learning opportunities. This year, the group traveled to Costa Rica, where students were able to engage with the local culture and experience the ecological diversity of the country. They visited a rural elementary school where those students taught them about local customs. Students were put to work on an organic farm and visited a butterfly garden. They also hiked near a volcano, visited the ocean, and spent time in a cloud forest. Students ate at local places and saw the standard of living of the majority of residents of the country. What a wonderful experience these teachers provided for their students. The teachers took their time to plan the details of the trip, as well as use some of their summer for the travel with the group. Their dedication and caring provided the students with a memorable learning experience. Mrs. Barker would also like to encourage others to research and contribute to scholarship programs that support learning. Besides the funding for the student, Mrs. Barker also has applied for and been awarded professional development grant from the Cedar Rapids Schools Foundation to help fund her attendance at the National Council of Teachers of English National Convention, and a scholarship from Grant Wood Area Education Agency to attend the Iowa Culture and Language Conference. Thank you, Mr. Kelsey and Mrs. Barker, for your dedication to students and your commitment to learning and making connections.
Thank you very much, Sue. Anyone else wish to address the board at this time on any topic? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to the consent agenda. Anyone want to pull something for separate consideration or have questions or comments on any item in there? John?
I do. I'd like to pull, let's see here, items BA 14099.1. It's the roof improvements at Roosevelt Middle School. BA 14100.1, roof improvements at Hiawatha Elementary School. BA 14101.1, roof improvements at Grant Elementary School. And let's see if I can find this. Hang on here 1 second. There we go. So BA 14110.1, purchase of 7 school buses for the transportation department.
Okay.
So my purpose of pulling this is, as Mr. Cash mentioned, there was a vote on increasing the PEPL, our tax that we use in the district for very specific purposes, for improvements of buildings and for transportation purposes. It has nothing to do with our general fund, which pays for salaries and benefits. It's about 80% of our budget as a school district, making sure that we have teachers, making sure that we have custodians, counselors, mental health experts, people working with our kids in the classrooms. That's where most of our budget goes. The budget, and again, we're all taxpayers, budget for the PEPL has remained the same for years. And I'm pulling these items just to point out the things that PEPL actually pays for. These are roofing projects, $145,000 at Roosevelt Middle School. The roof leaks, we need to fix it. Hiawatha, the roof leaks, it's a couple $100,000. We have buses that are almost 15 years old or more. We're worried about safety of our kids. We need to buy buses. 7 new buses are being bought at several $100,000. These are things that PEPL goes to pay for. It doesn't go to pay for anybody to go on lavish trips. It doesn't pay for anybody to get marble in bathrooms. It doesn't go to pay for artwork in any of these buildings. It didn't go for this building. So I want the public to understand that these are the things that are critically important. And we as a board, I'll just say, as we listen to the public and say, we want to have neighborhood schools, that's fine. Our neighborhood schools are becoming old buildings. A lot of them are very old buildings. They take a lot more maintenance, just like our houses do in Cedar Rapids. You need to put money into your house to keep the roof from leaking, to keep the yard, the plumbing working. All those things cost a lot of money. We all know that. When we asked to double, as the press like to say, Mr. Cash has reminded us, double the tax, for the average homeowner, that was about $50 a year. I'm willing to invest $50 more of my middle income money to make sure that we have neighborhood schools that are the best for our kids that we can have. So again, I don't know whether or not this board will ever bring that up or not, but I wanted to pull those to give the public an idea of where those monies actually go. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So we'll keep those items on the consent agenda.
Yes.
And those were your comments. Any other comments or any other thoughts or items that you'd like to pull? Seeing none, this is a roll call action due to the personnel report.
Director Rosenthal.
Aye.
Director Laverty.
Aye.
Director Anhalt.
Aye.
Director Witt.
Aye.
Director Westerkamp.
Aye.
Director Humbles.
Aye.
President Meisterling.
Aye. Next, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Dave to talk about a plan for demolition of district property at 912 18th Avenue Southwest, Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Thank you. Lincoln Elementary School has not been an elementary school in this district for approaching 50 years. I certainly want to recognize the work that Kirkwood Community College did on the building to keep it serviceable for their adult uses during the time that Kirkwood Community College maintained programming in the facility. The facility had a reversion clause that should Kirkwood ever quit using the facility, it would revert to back to district ownership. When they abandoned the building, and I don't say that negatively, but they quit using the facility, that the building did revert back to the district. We did a title search and found out that the alleyway on which the newest edition of that facility was never properly deeded to the school district. So we went through about a year-long process of getting the clear title to the land that the building actually sat on, or sits on, I should say. So we need to thank Kirkwood for its diligent use of the facility, and I certainly agree with the speaker regarding fairly good shape. Yeah, for a building 100 years old, the HVAC system was brought up to date during Kirkwood's ownership, so I certainly want to acknowledge that that's the case. Also acknowledge that Lincoln is 100 years old now, and it does show its age, and it does have some significant issues regarding any reuse on the ADA front, as well as the asbestos issues. That said, we have taken over a year and diligently sought developers, and no developer has come forward to this point. Should a developer come forward, any action that you're asked to take tonight is not final in the sense that we have not approved a contract for demolition. We're only seeking your consent to move forward with that. And it is my fervent hope, along with the people here representing the historical society or historical interest, I should say, that spoke, it is my fervent hope that somebody will come forward with an appropriate interest, and that the publicity of moving this issue forward will help spur that interest and help it to come forward. That said, this property costs money to maintain, even at a minimal level, so that the property is not deteriorating. It costs funds to send people over on a regular and routine basis to walk through the building to see that there's no damage, to see that the interior is not degraded in any way. And we know that there are things that we might do, should it be ultimately demolished, to save certain elements of the building. And we would certainly look into that. And in fact, I have had that conversation with district architects and engineers at Shive about building that into any general conditions that we move forward with. If you vote to move forward, you are not voting to demolish Lincoln School today. You're voting consent for the district to move forward with plans. And we would have to bring those plans back to you at a future board meeting for approval. If in the intervening time an alternate use comes forward, great. That's something that would be viewed as an outcome. But we do have interest in the land site as land. And we know that interest exists for the site should it be cleared of the building. The district has no need of the building, and in my estimate, the maintenance and ongoing costs of that facility for a year is costing us a classroom teacher. And I hate to put it in that blunt of terms, but that's the reality. We're in the classroom teacher cost arena for keeping that facility, and we need all of those resources dedicated to current educational needs. So the recommendation is for you to approve moving forward with the demolition, but understand that does not mean it will be demolished. It means that administration is going to move forward to seek a solution that would include demolition. If in the intervening time something comes up, we'll give it a due consideration, and further, you would have to actually approve a contract for demolition at some future time, should that be the case. I guess my last comment is there are some city requirements that must be met, and certainly your consent tonight to move forward on this will trigger us officially going forward with those steps with the city and the processes that the city of Cedar Rapids has put in place. So those are my comments, board, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, open it up for discussion. Ann?
Could you repeat? I had trouble hearing you. Kirkwood had the building for how many years?
Approximately 40 years.
And then it reverted to us about 2 years ago?
That's correct. A little over 2 years ago.
And then for over a year, we tried to see if there'd be people who would buy it.
That's correct. It's been actively pursued with Scott Olson as our agent of record.
Okay, thank you.
John?
So over that year, has Mr. Olson had any proposals for use of the building?
No. I would have a obligation, just like I have with the next item, should a proposal have been made. My obligation, since I'm not the decision maker on it, would be to take it to the board. The board has not received any offers on that property at all.
Alan, did you have your?
Oh, the Kirkwood question was the big one. I thought that was something that Kirkwood had used for a long period of time, and they've moved on and they found new facilities. So that was my question.
Yeah, that's correct, and we have lots of partnerships with Kirkwood, and I certainly want to speak highly of their use of the facility and their maintenance of the facility. But it's 50 years past this district's use.
Okay, Gary?
Well, I appreciate the comments that we heard this evening from Beth DeBoom and Mark Hunter, and certainly appreciate keeping historical aspects. And I hope that someone would come forth, as they suggested that there is interest, but we have actively pursued over the year, looking for a buyer, and no one has stepped forth. We have a responsibility, I believe, as a board, to best use of our resources, and as Dr. Benson said, it's costing us money right now. Some resources that we're really stretched with and struggling with to adequately meet the needs we have. So I support it, particularly appreciate the fact that we're not, this move does not demolish the building at this point, and I hope that the attention that this meeting and public hearing, that those people that are interested will come forth with legitimate offers, so.
Yeah, I would amplify the resource issue. The resources that we're spending on it now are out of operating funds or out of our general funds. It's utility dollars, it's maintenance and operations dollars that are the same bucket of money, if you will, that would pay for teachers. And in pursuant to John's comments on the PEPL, the money it would take to demolish it would be sales tax dollars, would silo dollars, which are not available for the purposes of paying for educational services to current students. So your comments kind of allowed me to clarify that.
I have a question. So if someone would come forward and make an offer, that would be brought back to the board for consideration? And by voting tonight, doesn't necessarily mean that the building is going to be disposed of yet? Is that correct?
That's correct. Our instruction to Scott Olson is to continue to aggressively market the building, and anyone listening or anyone that has individuals who might be interested, Scott's more than happy to take them through the building and to give them all of the information that we've gathered and have on it.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to add, in my mind, how I see the timeline, if and when administration brought it back to us for consideration of demolition, we would then have to file a demo permit with the city of Cedar Rapids, and then it would go into the Historic Preservation Commission's review, or purview, if you will, the 60-day process. So I think we're still several months away from any type of activity at that location.
And I have to abstain for the very reason that you said, the historic preservation. My wife is a member of that. So I think it better I abstain from this so she can act on that or do what she has to do.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Certainly.
Any other comments or discussion from the board? Ann?
Well, just, Dr. Benson, you mentioned the operating costs. The other thing, though, is that if something else larger happened to the building or needed attention, then that would have to come out of the PEPL fund, right?
That's correct.
Which is already, we have concerns about. so.
Stressed.
Okay.
So it's recommended that the Board of Education approve the resolution providing the district administration the authority to proceed with demolition planning. There is a resolution. Ann, could you read that for us, please?
Yeah, the resolution is that for the disposal by demolition of the Cedar Rapids Lincoln Elementary School building located at 912 18th Avenue Southwest, Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Okay, is there a second, please?
Second.
All action?
Director Laverty?
Aye.
Director Ann Halt?
Aye.
Director Witt?
Aye.
Director Westerkamp?
Abstain.
Director Humbles?
Aye.
Director Rosenthal?
Aye.
President Meisterling?
Aye. Next, I'm going to turn it back over to Dave to talk about the sale of district property at 3200 Pioneer Avenue Southeast, Cedar Rapids.
Because of my involvement at my company too, I'm going to abstain.
Do you need to leave the room? I think you do.
Yeah, I will.
I'll try not to forget about bringing you back, Alan. Laurel, will you remind me that we need to bring him back?
We'll do that.
Alan's unforgettable.
He is unforgettable, you're right.
Thank you, President Meisterling. At this time, we're going to turn our attention to the Monroe property. Regarding the timeline, this property was no longer used beginning the beginning of the 12-13 school year through the current 13-14 school year. So a little over a year. We have been actively looking for a buyer. It is true that we had an appraisal done, which is part of our due diligence. And it is true that this offer is significantly less than appraisal. However, it is a legitimate offer from individuals well-known in the community, and I have a obligation to bring an offer forward to the board for consideration. In that regard, there is a notice of a public hearing. That notice was duly given at the last board meeting, and you see the results of that notice and certainly a community meeting that was held there and a subsequent city P&Z,
Planning and zoning.
Planning and Zoning meeting that this issue was considered. So the issue has been pretty transparent. It's been out in the community for some time, as evidenced by the petition and as evidenced by the speakers here this evening. And we appreciate your coming out and commenting on development plans in your neighborhood. That said, we have a legitimate offer to consider. It comes to us with some contingencies and with some planning. To that end, I will be introducing a series of speakers who are going to explain the proposal in its entirety to the board so that you have that information. At this time, I would call on Doug Laird, who represents the district as a real estate agent.
And Madam Chairman, Superintendent Benson, and Board, I'm going to summarize what you've seen before you, just so we've got it all teed up and know what the details are of the offer. I'll be followed by Joe Locke, who will talk about the applicant's, the buyer's suggested use, as well as another consultant and the site engineer to tell you everything you need to know for details. First of all, the buyer is 3200 Pioneer LLP, a partnership formed by the Affordable Housing Network in Four Oaks. They have a vision to create 43 units workforce housing on this site. Purchase price is $250,000. The price is based on the cost to renovate the existing school into 19 of the 43 units with a projected total cost of about $9 million. You'll note that the offer does call for cash, but it is contingent upon receiving tax credits, so we'll note that as a contingency further on down. Closing is scheduled for June of 2014. The reason for the delay of closing is that tax credits must be received. It requires an award in March of 2014 for those tax credits. Your decision tonight is also the offer has an expiration time of October 15th, 5 p.m. this year. We have 8 contingencies. First of all, the normal property inspection will occur within 60 days of your approval. An environmental assessment of the property would be completed within 90 days of full acceptance. Buyer is in the process of rezoning. You heard Dr. Benson speak to that. That was actually, that did occur last Thursday night, the 10th of October. The vote was 8-0 for approval by the Planning Commission. It now moves to the City Council, if you so approve, and the site plan, which Mr. Ransom will be discussing, as well as the preliminary plat. There's a 120-day period with which the city goes through a process, and certain of those items, i.e. the site plan and the preliminary plat, have to be approved. Finally, last 3 things. The school board this is contingent upon you approving this by October 15th. The city of Cedar Rapids approving all of the entitlements that we've talked about already, a site plan, preliminary plat, by December 8th. And then also the low-income tax credit in March of 2014. Once all of those items are taken care of, then you'd move forward to closing. It's also particularly interesting to note that the property right now is not on the tax roll. It's a community asset, so there is no assessed valuation. The applicant is going to take the value of that property, put it back on the tax rolls. I suppose it'd be actually on the tax rolls. I'm not sure if it ever was. It was probably property owned by the city in the history. And also that all of the approvals in the contingencies are required to receive maximum points throughout the way in a competitive process. So those are the major details of the 7-page offer that you had before you in a summary form. I'll turn it over now to Joe Locke, Executive Director for the Affordable Housing Network.
Joe, before you speak, let me give one clarification I think that is important for the board to know is the time period, because I made a point of this with the Lincoln property, so I want to make a point of it in this property. In the time period between your approval and closing, the Affordable Housing Network are meeting those costs. The basic cost of utilities and our bill-back costs for walkthroughs and routine maintenance and snow removal, whatever those costs might be, we have an additional clause in the contract that those costs would be paid by the purchaser in the interim while we're waiting. So I really thought, since I stressed that point before, that I would make that point here. Thank you. Joe?
Good evening, school board members and staff. As Doug said, I'm Joe Locke. I'm the Executive Director of the Affordable Housing Network, also known as ANI. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and present today. ANI owns and manages more than 800 single and multifamily affordable housing units in each quadrant of Cedar Rapids. We're the largest provider, nonprofit provider of affordable housing in Cedar Rapids. More than a year ago, ANI approached the city to ask what was the area of greatest need and, as a nonprofit, where we could make the most significant impact. And their answer was immediate: 3- and 4-bedroom homes and apartments for working class families. We went to work to find a site. We looked all over the city, and one site very quickly came to the top, and that was the shuttered Monroe Elementary School at 3200 Pioneer Avenue Southeast. So the Monroe site has several specific advantages. First of all, it's a large tract of land that could easily support low-density, single-family, 3- and 4-bedroom housing. With a creative, adaptive reuse development, there's an existing school building on the site that could be adapted into further 3- and 4-bedroom housing. It's adjacent to a city park, which is certainly a major amenity, and to provide stability to a neighborhood by creating a limited-use residential development for family-oriented workforce housing. So ANI knew that we needed experts to help us in this endeavor, and so we went to the best in the business. We went to Holland Hull Engineering in alphabetical order, OPN Architects, Skogman Homes, Novak Design Group, and Olmsted Construction. Each of these partners said a resounding yes, that they thought it was a worthwhile project and they wanted to be a part of moving it forward. Now, we all know that all landlords are not created equal. Every day we see significant differences between landlords that care about their tenants and those that don't. And in those properties where they don't, we see overcrowding, multiple people that aren't on leases that are living there, people that are living in truly appalling conditions that are a reality for too many people in Cedar Rapids. And this creates disruptions that nobody wants. So to live in an affordable housing unit, all prospective tenants must pass 3 tests. First, they must pass a criminal background check. Next, they must pass a prior landlord check. And finally, they must pass a credit check. In return, we ask our tenants for 3 things: that they pay their rent, that they follow the rules, and that they be a good neighbor, or they face the consequences. Affordable Housing Network isn't an absentee owner or manager. We interact with our tenants to ensure a superior affordable housing experience. Every year we send 4 surveys to our tenants, but the one I spend the most time with is what is called the Tenant Satisfaction Survey. In each of the last 2 years, we've sent surveys to every tenant with an average 25% return rate, which is pretty significant. But we go one step further. To make sure that it's statistically significant and it's valid, the surveys are sent and tabulated and analyzed by Dr. Bob Walker and his graduate students at Mount Mercy University. We ask both qualitative and quantitative questions, with the latter on a 5-point scale, Questions like, would you recommend where you live to others? And do you feel safe and well cared for by the Ani Tenant Relations and the maintenance staff that are on call 24/7, 365? Well, the results in each of the last 2 years, Ani's received an aggregate score of 4.5 on a 1 to 5 point scale. So we hold ourselves to very high standards. And I'm very proud of that I have got a staff of people that not only are professionals and good at what they do, but truly care about the people that we serve. Affordable Housing Network is here for the long term, to see this endeavor become successful for years to come. If it pleases the chair, I'd like to introduce Corey Houchins-Witt, who is the Director of Real Estate Development for the Affordable Housing Network, to talk more about specifics of this great development. Corey?
Good evening, school board. My name is Corey Houchins-Witt. I'm the Director of Real Estate Development at Affordable Housing Network. I wanted to address in my comments 3 issues. One, first, property management. Who will live in this development, how it will be maintained, and how we deal with some of the tenant issues that come up during the course of property management. So property management being the first item. I also wanted to discuss the impact of affordable housing on property values. And thirdly, I'd like to discuss the development amenities that we anticipate with this project. First, property management. We, as Joe mentioned, we have a very rigorous tenant screening process. We conduct criminal, including sex offender checks. We don't allow drug offenders or violent offenders or sex offenders into our properties. We do prior landlord references. We go back 3 years and look into the housing histories of each applicant to determine whether or not that they were good tenants at their previous places of residence. We do a credit check. And also, with this particular property, we will also be screening for the ability to pay rent. This project is a low-income housing tax credit project, and so there are no operating subsidies. Tenants must be able to pay rent. Rents for these units are projected to be $625 for a 3-bedroom unit and $700 for a 4-bedroom unit. Residents will have to have a steady income, and we anticipate that will generally be from employment. We expect tenants' incomes to generally be between $29,000 and $43,000 for a family of 4. I'd like to talk a little bit about what happens when we have issues with our tenants. The low-income housing, well, first of all, tenants are required to abide by a lease and house rules that they execute upon move-in. The low-income housing tax credit rules require a 6-month initial lease term, but after that, Ani is able to take tenants to a month-to-month lease. And this allows us more flexibility to issue 30-day notices or 3-day notices when problems arise. If tenants are creating problems, property management staff respond swiftly. Depending on the severity of the issue, either a 30-day notice or a 3-day notice is given. 3-day notices are given in cases of criminal activity. We have an in-house attorney that assists with evictions, and we have a high rate of success because of the expertise of our property management staff. Regarding property maintenance, one thing that we heard from neighbors at our neighborhood meeting and other comments that we collected, as you'll see in the site plan, we are redeveloping the school. It's an adaptive reuse of the school into 19 units of housing. And then around the perimeter of the property, we'll have 24 new construction, single-family type dwellings. These will not be individually owned by the residents. The whole project is rental, so the Affordable Housing Network will be performing all the property maintenance for the development. We'll be doing the snow removal, the lawn mowing, the grounds maintenance. We have a large property management staff of about 15 maintenance people, in addition to 7 full-time tenant relations staff. We dedicate a large portion of our budget to annual maintenance and repairs and snow removal. And we also fund upfront an operating reserve that we would draw on in cases of emergency, as well as annually we fund a reserve that ongoing that we can tap in cases of emergency. All of this construction will be new. We're choosing to use hardy materials of cement board on the housing, architectural shingles, metal soffits and fascias, which will be hold up to wear and tear. I'd like to address the property value issue, affordable housing's impact on property values. I'll also address the two studies that were cited by some of the neighbors who were concerned about the property. Both of those documents I know well. So we did the impact of affordable housing on property values. It's a complex issue. It involves a number of variables, but the trend across studies is clear that affordable housing generally has a neutral impact on property values and sometimes can have a positive effect. We looked at 10 studies from authors such as Tufts University, New York University, the National Association of Home Builders, University of Wisconsin, the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, which was one of the studies quoted, the National Association of Realtors. And I'd like to just share a couple of pithy statements from these studies, not all of them, but that I think underscore this assertion that affordable housing has a neutral impact. The National Association of Realtors in March 2013 stated, most studies indicate that affordable housing has no long-term negative impact on surrounding home values. In fact, some research indicates the opposite. In a paper presented to the National Association of the Home Builders, the paper stated, contrary to popular perceptions, multifamily projects do not have an adverse impact on surrounding property values. In a study done by the University of Wisconsin, in the executive summary it states, to this point, our results for Wisconsin are generally consistent with the results in other studies. We have not been able to find evidence that Section 42 developments cause property values to deteriorate. And Section 42 is another name for this low-income housing tax credit program. Last one I would like to quote from Arizona State University. Affordable housing's impact on surrounding property values is a complex question involving a number of factors. However, even in those studies that do discover depressed property values, the impacts are generally slight and often transitory. In the Minnesota study that was brought up earlier by a neighbor, I know that the quote that he is citing from that study about public housing can have a negative impact sometimes on property values. It's a little bit of a misapplication of that finding to our project. Public housing, what we're doing is not public housing. Public housing usually has operating subsidies where the tenants will pay a third of their income, and if their income is zero, then that's what they pay. Low-income housing tax credit projects don't have that rental structure. And in fact, that study says that, the Minnesota study says that projects managed by nonprofit organizations commonly have positive impacts on property values due to sustained quality management of the property. Finally, the Maxfield report was brought up. The part that was quoted in that report to you, I believe, had to do with subsidies given home builders who were, the product they were producing was single-family for-sale housing, and the subsidies lowered the purchase price and therefore lowered the values around the houses around them. We're not selling our homes. This is a rental project, so it's just a misapplication of that particular finding from the Maxfield report. Finally, one more point on property values. I just wanted to state in this context, and Doug brought this up, that this development will produce property tax revenue. We'll be taking a parcel that's currently not on the assessor's rolls and not producing any tax revenue, and also to mention that low-income housing tax credit programs, properties are not eligible for the residential rollback that was recently created by the state. A lot of apartment buildings are going to be able to get reclassified as residential and be eligible for this rollback and pay lower taxes. And for whatever reason, low-income housing tax credit projects were not included in that property tax relief measure. Finally, I just wanted to cite some of the amenities that will come with the project. We intend for certain amenities to be shared with the neighborhood. We're going to maintain the playgrounds that are on site currently, use that equipment and move it, and we're going to have 2 different playgrounds on site. We plan on having a community garden and a full-size basketball court that will be open to neighborhood residents. The units themselves are going to be very nice units, going to be large units, 3 and 4 bedroom, in-unit washers and dryers. They'll have storage. There'll be a community room with a computer learning center and free internet. We also will have security cameras on site to help maintain the safety in the development. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Dick Ransom of Hall & Hall, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the site plan, other issues that have been brought up, including traffic. And so I'll just turn it over now. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dick Ransom with Hall & Hall Engineers and would like to address some of the site plan issues for this site. And I brought a board down front. I don't know how well all of you up there probably can't see it. But as was, Dennis, if you would. As was mentioned, this is a 43-unit site, and in working with this, and this is about 7.69 acres. And so the building occupied the front portion, but towards the rear there was open space, there was some playgrounds. But there's also a fairly significant wooded area in the back on a steep slope. And in laying this out, the attempt here to create the single-family units was to provide as little impact, and in fact it's only a minor impact along one edge. The rest of the units are in the open green space and not impacting on that wooded area. So that was part of the consideration. The other part was to provide access in the driveways and the parking facilities for the units. And I know the board heard tonight a concern about parking, which seemed more particularly addressed to when this was a school and they were having large functions. However, with this site, we are providing 2 parking stalls per unit, which is the city code. We are also providing additional parking for the guests to those units, which will either meet or exceed the city's requirements for those additional parking stalls. You also heard tonight some concerns about density for this area and about this being overly dense. However, given the size of the area, the calculation here, there's about just shy of 7,800 square feet per unit, and that includes the units inside the building, of land area for each of these. And to put that into perspective, the areas to the east and to the north of this are zoned a low-density residential zoning in the city of Cedar Rapids of an R3, which allows for 6,000 square feet of land area per residential unit. So that would compare to the 7,800. And the 7,800 is actually more than the R2, which is the city's second most open zoning class, and that's 7,200 square feet per unit in terms of the zoning. So in fact, this density would qualify as low density inside of the city's structure. So that was a concern that was expressed. There is also some RMF1, which is the multifamily zoning, which is around this area. Another issue that was discussed was traffic. And in the review that was done by the City of Cedar Rapids Traffic Engineering Department, they expressed no concerns about the traffic here. In fact, Pioneer Avenue and 34th Street, which is near this site, Pioneer being in front, are both minor arterials in the city's traffic classification for roadways. And so we're not accessing out onto a residential street, but onto roadways which were already designed for collector streets for the areas to move traffic. So this site would then lend itself well in terms of the traffic concerns. We understand there are existing issues within the area, but those are, as you've heard, speeding and some other things which would seem to be more in a code enforcement area rather than in a site planning area. The site also will have stormwater management. That will be required. There were concerns expressed at CPC about during the construction time, would there be issues with erosion? And given some of the slopes in the back, that will be a concern that will be addressed as part of the overall design of the system. There also are some areas, and you can see some green areas along the edges where additional screening will be constructed as a way of helping to work those single-family units in where they're the closest to the edges of the property to make them, well, they're already similar to the single-family housing that's there, but this will just provide some additional screening in terms of vegetative screening. There will be connectivity. You can see the arrow going over into the park site. That's also a benefit for this area, that the residents can share in what's already an existing city park. And there will be the walking areas, the sidewalks that will connect all of those units around and then connect it to the public sidewalk system. So with that, Joe or anyone else, if there are others that would like to present other things, otherwise the team would be available for questions from the board.
Okay, thank you very much. Very informative, and we appreciate the detail, the level of detail that you provided. Now I'll turn this over to the board for comments, questions, or discussion. Nancy?
When I look at the 43 units, what is the space in between, the square footage from between each one of those?
Yeah, let me address that. The fire code would say 20 feet between each of those units. So that's, we would at least maintain that, and some we would try to get more, if possible, when we get into the final design of the site.
John?
So my understanding is that this matter went before the City Planning and Zoning Commission, was that last week, I believe? Is that right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And I'm reading the report from the city to the city staff to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Did they have any issues with any of the planned use for this site during that meeting? I did not get to attend, so.
Excuse me, yes, there were some questions with respect to some of the aspects that you have heard this evening in terms of the presentation. However, overall, you can see from the unanimous vote from the City Planning Commission of approval, in the end, they were satisfied that in terms of their concerns, that we had addressed all of those.
Thank you.
Ann?
Could you repeat those density numbers again for the square foot per
Yes, the site
unit?
itself is just shy of 7,800 square feet per unit.
Okay.
It's like 7789 or something like that. As engineers, we like these finite numbers, but rounded
Yeah, I just did the
ones-
math. I'm an engineer too. I had 7790. So, but I didn't know what the numbers were. You had said some of the surrounding numbers.
Yeah, the R3 zoning, which surrounds this area, the minimum lot size for that R3 zoning is 6,000 square feet
Okay.
in the Cedar Rapids City Code. And as I mentioned as well, the second most dense in the low-density residential is an R2 zoning, and that minimum lot size is 7,200 square feet per unit. And so that's a matter of comparison for the density of this site.
But that's how it's zoned. Do you know how dense the neighborhood actually is?
We have not done that calculation to look at some of that. We know that some of those lots to the north are larger
Okay.
than that, but I think in the area of a whole, you would find some 6,000 or in that R3 category lots in the neighborhood as a whole. But as a matter of answering that, no, we have not
Okay, thank you.
tried to do that.
Keith?
I think there's two issues here. One is the use that can be made of the property, which I see as the city use. The city has regulation over that. And certainly a lot of these comments that have come forth, I would hope we would make the city aware of the tapes and so on, that they can review them and see, when they make their decision, the concerns of the neighbors and so on. Our intention is we have a property that we've made the decision we need to dispose of, and have we properly marketed it, and have we allowed enough time on the market to sell the property? And to both of those, I can say, yes, we have. And one of the things we had when we started this whole process is, will the community continue to benefit? And affordable housing was one of the things, I think, in the early time period that we looked at. So those are our primary concerns, is selling it, trying to get the most amount of money out of it, and then it's up to the city to address a lot of these issues that have been raised here tonight. And again, I would really hope that we would make the city aware of the people that have addressed those issues. I would certainly be concerned too.
John?
I have a question for our real estate agent. So, Doug, is that right? All right. So, when we heard from Therese Hockey with the Monroe Neighborhood Pride Committee, I believe that's what you called yourself. Thank you. Questions were asked whether or not a better use would be made for senior centers, daycares, other types of uses. During the last year when you've marketed this property, have you had those types of interests come forward, and has there been any sort of serious negotiations for those types of uses before this offer was made?
Dr. Benson had a fairly good answer for the Lincoln School. If we had, there would be an offer before you, and you'd be considering it as well. This is a bona fide offer. We have an obligation to present it. So,
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
But there was interest, correct? I mean, there were
Yes.
other people, other groups had actually looked at the facility and determined it wasn't economical, maybe is a good word, for them to purchase the property. Is that correct?
Yes, I couldn't confirm that. I've received reports from our agent that several walkthroughs have occurred, one related to senior citizens and another related to a church. So there have been people who have looked at it. They've crunched their numbers, and they have not come back with an offer.
Okay, thank you.
and I guess that would be, the key point is we have, in our business, we have shoppers, we have prospects, and then we have actually people that really write bona fide offers that have been vetted and then we take to our clients. This is what you have before you.
Gary?
Comments. I don't think I have any questions at this point, but some personal comments. First of all, I appreciate the people that came out this evening. I have a real understanding. I experienced a similar kind of perplexity years ago where we lived, where someone came in and tried to change the housing and the neighborhood. They were successful, but I know we lived through it. But I know the uneasiness that we had, my wife and I, the questions that we brought forth, and so on. So I appreciate the concerns. I think over the last year, we've, as a district, we've been experiencing a lot of economic turmoil, and through those things, I continue to say that the problems that we have are not isolated to just the district, and I don't think we can, as a board, just isolate ourselves and say we're just a school board. We're also members of the community. And the issues that come before us are community issues, not just school issues, and I think there are ones that we have to also take into consideration. I know our legal obligation is to simply run the schools or oversee the schools. But I also believe that we're also have a community operation. We're to be a voice for the community. So this is it's a complex issue, but I appreciate the presentations and the answers. The fact is that we have sat at the property for a year. It is costing us money and will continue to cost us money. And it'll also cost the community money because it's not on property rolls. We're losing revenue in the process of it. We have an housing issue in this community, housing issue that needs to be addressed, and I appreciate affordable housing stepping forward. I think a very legitimate concern, and this is a nonprofit organization that is coming forth and serving our community. I think they've brought forth a very reasonable proposal for the area. I guess I do, maybe as we talk about nonprofit, long-term, if somebody can answer, what are your resources as a nonprofit and sustainability?
First of all, we currently own or manage approximately $46 million of property here in Cedar Rapids. And one of the constant things that we look at as being a mission-focused organization is how much mission can we afford? Well, one of the things that we do, and that frankly I'm very proud of, is that A, we run a tight ship, and that B, we fund our reserves to a level that's the national standard for all of our 800+ units throughout the entirety of Cedar Rapids in all 4 quadrants. And so that when there is an issue, we have a rolling 5-year plan that makes sure that if we have a $500 problem or a $500,000 problem, that we can take care of it. And that's because we do look long term, and we operate in a very transparent fashion. The other thing that I'll say too is that, appropriate or not, I have a vested interest in this because both my sons attended Monroe Elementary School, and I live in the neighborhood. And some of the signatures that were obtained, although there were signatures obtained all over town, a couple of them were on my street. And so it's an education issue, and it's an education issue that I need to bring up with some of my neighbors as well, that not only does Affordable Housing Network have its reputation on the line, but it's a point of pride that the way that we interact with our tenants and that we really care for them as individuals, and also to live in the apartment communities and the single-family homes and the multifamily homes. So, I'm a neighbor, and I want to see this succeed. And I think that the point of bringing stability to this neighborhood, because a shuttered school and the broken window theory, I don't know what would happen if nothing happened for another 3 or 4 years. But I do know that this is going to end up being a residential development that families are going to live there for the long term.
Thank you.
Yes, Ann?
Yeah, I appreciated Keith's comments, but I do want to let people know that we do listen to comments and take that into account in making a decision. I don't know that any of us came here, maybe leaning one way or another, but we don't decide until we vote. And so my question has to, again, with how it's being used and the concern about subsidized housing and the impact on property values. Could you talk about how this is subsidized, if that's during the construction or operations?
I'll turn it over to the expert, if you don't
Okay.
mind. Thanks.
The way that this program is structured is that the subsidy comes on the development side. So that allows the developer to take out less debt to make the project work, and therefore the overall operating expenses, because of the lower debt service, are less, and so we're able to charge lower rents. If we didn't have that development subsidy up front, then we, higher loan, higher rents. So that's how it works. It's not, like I said before, it's not like leased housing or Section 8, project-based Section 8, where you pay 1/3 of your income, even if it's zero, and the government picks up the rest. It's not like that, so.
Okay, thank you.
I also live in this neighborhood. I did attend the open house that they conducted, and I did listen to neighbor comments. I also went to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, and I quite honestly walked around the school all Saturday afternoon and contemplating this type of project. I think they have a lot of hurdles to overcome. I think they have to get their tax credits from the state. They do have to go through a lot of city committee meetings and processes to ensure that they're handling their storm water runoff and all of the other requirements that every developer has to comply with. They are not taking any of the trees down, to my knowledge, to the north of that which is a really beautiful area, so that should be able to keep the wildlife that is currently habitating in that area. So I do think that you adequately, during the Planning and Zoning Process Committee meeting, I thought that you adequately addressed the traffic, the property values in the area. We have a very austere nuisance abatement ordinance that was recently passed in the city. I think that will contribute to keeping this area safe and attractive. So I just wanted to share my thoughts with the board also. Gary?
Some points of clarification, I believe, or reemphasize it. This is contingent, this agreement is contingent on, first of all, it still has to have final approval from the city council. If it doesn't, it would void this agreement. It's still contingent on them getting the grant from the state, which I understand could go until March. But this agreement would also bind us, keep us from entering any other offers in that time. So I appreciate the fact that within this agreement, though, we also have the stipulation that because we are bound by not being able to dispose of the property, they are going to take care of the maintenance, any maintenance that incurs until the time that agreement is finalized, which could be as late as March. So I think those are positive things from our standpoint, from a board standpoint, also from protecting community interests too.
Any other comments? Okay, it is recommended the Board of Education approve the resolution approving sale of district property. Ann, can you read that resolution as a motion?
Yeah, I move that there's this resolution for a conveyance of real property.
Okay, so I'm sorry, is there a second?
Second.
Roll call action?
Director Ann Halt?
Aye.
Director Westerkamp?
Aye.
Director Humbles?
No.
Director Rosenthal?
Aye.
Director Laverty?
Aye.
President Meisterling?
Aye.
You'll hold, I'll get Director Witt.
Forgot about him. Thank you all very much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for the board.
Okay, next I'm going to turn this over to Laurel Day and Dave Benson to talk about policy manual review and revisions.
Thank you. Policy Review Committee is bringing forward some recommendations this evening for you to consider. The first is regulations that are dealing with public participation in meetings and public hearings, and also the procedure on election of board officers. These recommendations were suggested by the Board of Education, and we have brought those forward now for your review. In addition, we're bringing forward Regulation 506.8, Family and Medical Leave. That regulation is just up for review. There's no suggested changes. Regulation 602.7 and Procedure 6027A on religious holidays were also past due, and they have minor revisions for your consideration. Same with Regulation 604.9 and 604.9A on student use of network technology resources. This really was updated to include, now that we have student email accounts. And lastly, a proposed regulation that comes to us from our Transportation Department on vehicle idle reduction. And that is a brand-new proposed regulation. We would be happy to answer your questions. Don?
Question about the vehicle idle reduction. This is the first I've heard of this. Is this something new that's going on at the federal or state level, or is this a district initiative?
Steve, maybe you can answer this. I'm going to ask you to open up those doors because they are locked, and I don't want the public to be.
It's just, yeah, the noise level was getting.
I can't have them locked as an open meeting. Thank you. Maybe.
Just one. Just one.
One's fine.
Just one.
Yeah, thank you.
Let you open it.
Sorry about that.
Not on.
John, or Steve, is your mic on?
Going to have to give instructions from Mike. Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Can you start over, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. In answer to your question regarding the idling of buses, this board regulation, there is gaining momentum to do what is right from an ecological, environmental standpoint. I think one of our schools to the east of us not long ago, I believe Mount Vernon Schools, was in the media regarding also a similar policy there to reduce the amount of time that we idle bus engines and other school district vehicle engines as well when they are in use.
Did that satisfy you, John?
It did. I would just ask that if this is passed, that we have a report back in a year how this is working, and we ask families that have children on the buses how it's working.
Keith?
I called Dr. Benson today about this. I think it's a policy that should not be a policy because it should be more of an administrative thing. That's what our desires. I see it's something that's not easily policed, that's going to be more problematic than anything. You know, it says temperature in there, it refers to a temperature. And, you know, I can see people saying, well, you shouldn't have your bus running or whatever. So I just see it as regulations that are unnecessary, that aren't really productive, and we ought to be able to manage it in other ways other than the policy.
Well, certainly being in a very highly regulated industry, I can appreciate the sentiment on not over-regulating. We do have a transportation handbook, if you want to think about it in those terms, our operating procedures manual for our transportation department, and we could include such an item in there. This doesn't have to come back, right?
Regulations do not come back, that's correct.
Why don't we agree to pull it and let me pursue an alternate course with the issue?
Ann?
Although I agree with Keith and that it'd be hard to police, putting it in the policy and regulation manual does elevate it. Having it in the transportation handbook, then only, my perception of that would be that applies to the bus drivers and the fleet drivers. This regulation applies to everybody using a school district vehicle, whether it's a van or a car or whatever it is and wherever it is. So, I mean, you could even extend it to say it applies to the bobcats and snow plows and things like that as well. So this elevates a little bit, and I think there's some value in that. So as this is pulled and you decide what to do with it, I think look at where you're trying.
Yeah, I have thought about that in terms of our operators that are infrequent operators of vehicles. Check out a van, check out a car for this or that. I think through some signage investigation, we could promote good driving habits in that way. So I'm just suggesting that because there's a concern been brought up about it, that we pull it for now and let's do some more investigation on it.
Okay.
Harry?
Dr. Benson, along with that, it may be, and I know we can't govern, we can govern our own employees and our own, but the general public, we don't have a lot of governance to, but I do know that there are. What?
That's probably a good thing.
Yeah. Let's your perfect world. Yeah, let's rein in what we're trying to do. But I know that there are schools in our area that are posting signs and so on, asking parents and so on, just as good stewards of our environment. So it might enable us also to promote, also being just good stewards, not just of our own vehicles, but also the general public too.
That's right, the parent pickup lines. And this is one of the issues, again, that goes back to PEPL. Almost all of our facilities that are elementary were built in an era of neighborhood walking. Okay? And we have lines of cars, and elementary principals would tell you that management of pickup and delivery is a constant, ongoing concern, particularly as it relates to student safety. So we'll pursue that issue also in the signage arena.
Other comments? Okay. Thank you. I did want to point.
I have one other one.
Okay.
Under public participation, board meetings and public hearings, in the fourth paragraph, I would like to have legal counsel review that, whether we can actually have that in policy. A meeting that I attended says that you can't make that kind of a policy.
Is it the part that starts with at a public meeting, no person may orally initiate?
Right.
Okay.
The interpretation I've had is when you open it up to the public, you cannot restrict the voice of
That was
that
my
person.
understanding too.
Yeah, and so I question well, the whole paragraph. I think we need to have legal counsel look at it and maybe reword it some way that, we encourage you not to, or whatever,
That's
But as written, I question.
regulation 202.11.
Right.
We'll review it with legal counsel.
I also want to note that we're changing our public remark time from 3 to 5 minutes, so that's a big change for this board. And our meeting start time, although it's not in here, will be 5:30, starting with our next meeting. Any other comments on any of these other policies that are presented tonight? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to turn this over to Trace to talk about school improvement planning process.
We're always pleased to bring issues to the board that deal with our mission of improving educational outcomes for our students. And this was our agenda item this evening in that arena.
Hey, thank you, Director Meisling, Board. Just want to spend a few minutes tonight talking to you about the school improvement planning process. To just give you a brief overview of what our schools have been engaged in and where things are heading. We follow the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle in virtually all of our work. Most of you are familiar with that through the quality improvement tools I'm sure you employ in your work as well. And so we're constantly asking our buildings, our principals, and our teachers to think about Plan, Do, Study, Act and continuously improving their practices towards the excellence for all vision that we have. Carla Reese has put together, and her team has put together, a wonderful tool that we take the buildings through each year. And they have just, they're wrapping up that process now. But basically, the first thing they do is they review last year's work. Did we implement what we said we were going to implement with fidelity? Did it work? Are there any surprises along the way? What are we learning? What adjustments might we need to make, and so forth? And so they spend some time really analyzing the cause based on their implementation data before we decide what is it you're going to do this year. Because if they decide that, you know, we really didn't implement that like we should, then we shouldn't move forward with something else until they address that. So those are some great conversations there. The next phase is an evaluation, is what does the data tell us about the activities that we undertook and our current reality? So what can we celebrate in terms of what we implemented and how it affected student learning and achievement? And what are some concerns and issues that we need to continue to address, or that as a result of being successful in one area, a new problem crops up, as they always do, and how do we move forward with that? The next step is root cause. So they look at, okay, celebrate what we did last year, look at concerns, and then in those concerns, where's the root cause in that? Did it have to do with we didn't provide adequate professional development for the teachers? Was it the fidelity of instruction needs improved? Implementation, time on task, whatever it is, the district and the schools really look for those possible causes in 5 areas. Is it an issue with curriculum? Is it an issue with instruction? Is it an issue with our assessment? Is it an equity or a cultural issue? Or is there something in the support system that was causing us issues? And of course, there isn't always just one, but they look for major trends and patterns as they begin to think about what are we going to do this year moving forward. And so their planning actions are really around what are the causes of some of our issues, what impact are we trying to get accomplished, and what evidence would we have that actually worked. And so as they identify root causes and build plans, they're focusing on what are we going to implement, what impact is it going to have, how are we going to know. And so what we're asking this year, each building, as they develop their action plans, we have a kind of a T-chart column. And on the left side is we're asking, what is it we're asking adults to do? Because it's the adult behavior that will impact the student learning outcomes. And so what we have them do is answer the question, we as adults promise to, and based on their root cause, they identify what they're going to do. So if it's an issue about effective instructional strategies or practices, then as adults, we pledge to implement these strategies with integrity, right? Well, if we do that, then what? And on the right-hand side would be where we see the impact on student learning. So if we improve our instructional strategies and the implementation of those strategies, we would expect student learning outcomes in math, science, reading, so forth to improve. We would expect to see behaviors go down because our students would be more engaged because of the strategies we're using, and so forth. And so each building has been working through this process to identify that and begin that implementation. We have 8 schools who are on a little bit of a different track, and that's because they're sign of 4 and 5, and so the requirements for their improvement plans have been elevated a bit. So they're engaged in the same planning process that the other schools are, with the additional emphasis on how are we going to change some governance structures and how are we going to think more intensely about speeding up the improvement process there. And so those 8 schools are involved in what we call 6-week rapid improvement cycles. And so those principals and instructional coaches, and Val and myself are going out into the schools, into the classrooms, and observing teachers for 10 minutes, watching for very specific things, questioning techniques. Are they engaging all the students and keeping them all interested? And then rapid feedback. So within that same week, the principal or instructional coach sits with the teacher and says, here's what I observed, where should we go next, what are you going to try tomorrow, here's what I saw that was wonderful, and so forth. And so this notion of 30 days to create a habit, it's kind of that 6-week cycle. Can we do 6-week intensive cycles to try to make improvements in key areas? And so we're laser focused on those key teacher behaviors that we were after, and that's part of their plan. And in addition to that, we have a weekly principals professional learning community. Those 8 teachers and sometimes the 8 instructional coaches meet with Val and I once a week to just talk about how's it going, what support do you need, how can we help. And we've been able to identify several things already that we could take off the plates of those buildings so that they could focus on this work. And so we just continue to do that and refine it. Like any new thing, it's going to be rough for a little bit until we get into the habit of it, but we're very encouraged by what we've seen thus far. With that, any questions?
I have a question. So schools that are not designated sign a 4-5, how often do they look at their school improvement plans? Yearly?
The intention of the school improvement plan is to be a living document, so they look at it intensely once a year, but the expectation is they're constantly looking at it, making adjustments, monitoring, looking at their assessment data. And that's part of the work of the building leadership team to do that.
Are those manuals still like that thick?
That's a question for Carla. If we use
So you disguise the size of that book, because those are the ones that I reviewed in the past. They're quite extensive. Okay, Gary?
I would comment was there somewhat around that, of what happens to the documents, because I think somewhere I have a ring folder. But are those, do we as a board have access to being able to look at we were given the paper copies. Can we have access, or do we have access to the?
They're all on the website.
They're all posted.
They're on our website.
It's electronic post on the web.
Isn't that a good answer, Gary?
That's an excellent answer, other than maybe as we redesign the website, they'll be a little even easier to access.
So this brings up the question, we heard the comment from a private vendor about the tutoring that's available. The district no longer does this, and there was a concern about how that was handled within the district. Can you address that again with the board so that we fully understand what you're doing to make sure that students that are at risk under federal law have access to the tutoring that they are allowed?
Right.
So.
And one of the things is that we have met that collaboration requirement by the state by doing the letter that went out, that was a state letter, as well as the fair that we did, the provider fair that we did in September, and we had good turnout. We are just sending out our letters to those providers now as to how many students have signed up, and it looks pretty good for some of our providers, including one that was here today. So that is good. The other thing we're doing, which is a little different, is we're doing a second sign-up in January. That's something we have not done in the past. And so there'll be a second opportunity for those families to get on board. If they've already received services, they can't get a second dip of that, but they can, for a family who has not participated, they can participate. Our schools are telling families about the services, that, there are supplemental educational services, providing them with those flyers in the schools, and they're, advocating for, this is a good opportunity, it's a free service, and again, they have to meet the criteria, but we have, I think, done a nice job of really getting that out there. So, and I think that second sign-up time will be a positive as well.
Great, thank you.
At the risk of extending the meeting for a few seconds, I just want to comment how pleased I am with the processes that are being used in the curriculum office and in the instructional side throughout OLL with this leadership team. We've really sharpened the focus. We have brought some sense of urgency to the process, and I'd publicly acknowledge everybody here in front of you, but certainly our new players and new people in new positions. They're doing an outstanding job for our kids and our faculty and staff. So thank you.
I run into some principals from time to time, and they talk about this is a very different school year. And they're pleased with the sense of urgency and the work that they're doing. So thank all of you for that. That's what we're all here for. Gary?
And I really appreciated the fact that the principals are being involved with their own PLCs. It was going to be one of my questions, was going to be how do we, I'm sure that I appreciate that we're starting at the grassroots level, and we're letting the individual buildings and the teachers really have a say and an input, and I think that's the best way to attract. But as they develop, I'm sure there's commonality that we would see between buildings. And so rather than reinventing the wheel and individuals building struggle, the principal PLCs, I think, and also with district administration and your support and the others, helping them to facilitate. So we're learning from each other, and that's one of the big values of the PLC. So a good process.
Okay. Any other comments from other board members? If not, thank you for a good meeting tonight. Take your calendars home. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and our meeting is adjourned.
Okay,